Welcome back, everyone. Here I am once again at EACD with our third guest on the show. And this time we're going to be talking about a poster. So welcome, Jorn Ockerman. How was that? Was that good?
Amazing.
From Ghent University. Yes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on such a short notice.
It's so lovely. No, well, when you told me about your research, and I thought, well, this is something that we need to talk about because we don't actually talk about this particular topic a lot. So your poster is titled Measurement Practices and Use of Technology Among Flemish Pediatric Physiotherapists, which I feel is so topical because technology, we're always talking about it now, and where does it actually sit? But before we get into that, maybe tell us a little bit about how you came into this area. Like, what brought you here? Because you're doing your PhD. That's not a small thing to decide on.
No, I think the main thing I remember when I graduated from my master's degree was the want to research something with. I prefer games, so
sure.
To research in games, but then especially technological tools which allow people to have a motivating time within their therapy. And I didn't find any click, or I tried some propositions with some professors, but my grades weren't the best of the class, so it was a little bit difficult to find my way back into the world of academia. So I was in practice for about 4 years.
Okay.
Then the company for which I now also work with, they came over with a device, which they showed. I saw the potential. It was the thing, when I was studying, I thought maybe a device that allows games in therapy would be amazing, but I'm not smart enough or technically inclined enough to make it myself. But I noticed that in their pitch, they explained EACD to therapists, so I kind of felt maybe there's no therapist working here.
Sure.
So I sent them an email. 2 weeks later, I could start.
Wow.
And then they quickly started the process of trying to get a backland grant, which is a firm cooperation between a university and a company in Flanders.
Right.
And that's basically how I rolled into the whole process of investigating technology within physiotherapy in Belgium.
Oh, look, that's a great story. I love that because firstly, the partnership between industry and university is really important, right? Because we were talking before, and we increasingly recognise that research can't be done in a silo. We have to do it together. And industry is, especially when we're developing technology, you're not the only person that will say, I'm not smart enough to do it. I have got no idea technically, but we want people who are good at technology combined with our clinical expertise to go, okay, now what can we do? Yeah,
and I think that's also a lot of the conclusions done by researchers who are studying gamification or serious games in clinical practice. Is the fact that, okay, they are there, but for instance, the Wii Fit was investigated to hell and great results.
Yes.
But the Wii is no longer made because it's a commercial company. And they stopped making movement games. So now what are the physiotherapists to do? Are they to look for second-hand editions of a Wii? And then if something breaks down, well, it was fun for 2 years, but now you're done. And I think collaboration between the industry and the sciences is the key to just advancing the implementation of technology within practices.
That's great. And I love that you've mentioned that about the Wii. I remember that phase too when it came out, and we all went, this is great. We can engage kids into this. But then what we also found was really difficult was it wasn't sensitive enough to pick up the different changes that movements that kids would have. So it was hard to play the games too, right?
Yeah, and I when I was in practice, we used the Wii as a motivational tool to reward them for just showing up and being agreeable with us. And I remember specifically a kid with DCD and autism playing the game. And there was one part of the game where you had to step in place and then you had to stop. That was one of the key mechanisms of the game. And then you had to stand on your toes if you wanted to jump. Well, the problem was that whenever they reached an obstacle, they just tensed up all their muscles and they went to a toe stance, their character jumped, and so they were unable to just play the game. So for 5 minutes long, it was completely frustrating. And I think that that's the approach of the company as well, to make adjustable extra games, and that's the primary focus of what companies working with. But then the problem becomes, are clinicians able to are they willing to learn a new technological tool?
Yeah.
In order for them to answer the questions or the demands of their patients. So that's the very difficult balance.
Yeah, and I think you really stepped us through some of the potential barriers already, you know, and we do need to address them, otherwise we can't implement them, which I guess leads to your poster. So tell me about the aim. What is it that you were wanting to demonstrate in this poster?
Well, this is the poster subject is specifically on pediatric physiotherapists, but the questionnaire itself, on which the poster is based, is broader. So there's, I think we had a sample of about 310 completed surveys.
That's great.
Of Flemish physiotherapists. Why Flemish? Because Belgium has a very interesting linguistical challenge. So we chose the Flemish part because within the country itself, and I'm going to refrain from any political statements, but there are differences in the northern region and the southern region, not only on language based, but also on just, the implementation of technology, the standards of I don't want to make a statement on any part, but there are differences. Sure. So we chose the Dutch population, or the Flemish-speaking, Dutch Flemish-speaking population of the country, to ascertain how are they measuring things, because my PhD research was about measurement, technology, and gamification.
Great.
So we wanted to know, how are they measuring? Are they measuring what they should be? And then how are their attitudes towards technology? Because it's all fun and games to say technology is great, but if the population whom has to use the technology is no fan of just the ID, then it's very difficult. So that's that was the aim of the investigation.
Great.
We posed a questionnaire in 4 parts.
Whoa.
I'm very sorry.
That's the table. That table.
We did 4 parts. One of them was about the demographics, standards stuff. Then the balance, the measurements, standardized outcome measures that we did. And then balance assessment measures specifically. And lastly, technology. Okay. So the results I showed in my poster are just main demographics to show that in pediatrics in Belgium, and I think if I look around the floor here, then it's kind of similar globally, but 95% of all participants were female in the pediatric field, which could also be an indication of why sometimes technology, I'm not saying women are difficult with technology, but there is some demographics suggesting that women sometimes feel less inclined to work with technology instead of providing care on a one-on-one basis. And then we asked them, what are you measuring? Are you measuring, first of all? Are you measuring correctly? Which I think in our findings, 11% said we adjust the test itself, we perform as it is written in the guidelines. So that's great. But we pick and choose sometimes which tests in a certain guideline we do. 11% says they do it often, so they basically take some pieces of the movement ABC or the bot, for instance, the bot 2.
Bot.
So they take parts and then they just perform those instead of others.
Wow.
So that's 11% that does it often, which means more than 80% of the time in our questionnaire. And then sporadically is between, I think, 50% of the time and then 80%, and that's 33%. So they're performing according to guidelines, but they're picking and choosing what test they're performing. The main thing why is because of time constraints. In Belgium, the reimbursement system is very strict, so they don't have the time to perform an hour and a half long test. So that's why technological tools might help to perform standardized and efficient.
That's such an interesting point, because when you talk about, obviously assessment is the core of how you can make a lot of decisions, how you can measure whether someone is improved or not. But when they are really lengthy, it's worth saying that, who's going to pay for that time, and is it a worthwhile use of time? I mean, technically it should be, but is there a better way? And I guess that's the question you're asking. Is there a better way we can assess, given those are some of the barriers?
The main philosophy of my doctorate was you just let them play extra games and you distill movement data from them playing the extra games. You don't test them formally, which some of the researchers will already be angry at me over their microphone. But the fact that you don't have to measure them to obtain standardized data or just objective data to start with is a very interesting thing to work with, I think, because...
That's an interesting point, because are you saying that's the difference between performance and capacity? You're not asking the child to perform for a particular assessment. You're sort of wanting to see what they can do day to day, what's reflective of their normal movement.
Or even the question, if we have our standardized tests, they're fine, they're great, but some of them are a bit boring.
Yeah.
If we just add some game elements to those assessment types, maybe they perform better. Problem is then, okay, but what does that say of all the reference data that we have of those boring tests?
Well, that's a really big question.
Yeah, I know.
Hey.
So I hope I hope there's an effect, but not too big an effect. But that's the question is if we're just testing their performance on a certain point.
Sure. What does it actually mean?
Yeah. Clinically.
Yeah. Those are really good points. And I know that even in my practice, we'll pick and choose which assessments we might do that represent the different levels of the ICF to gain an appreciation of it. This is where goal attainment scaling is really good because you get an appreciation of life. But, to perform an assessment, there's so many times where we go, oh, look, couldn't perform the post-assessment because the child was really unhappy. They didn't sleep well. There's no point performing that assessment, even though we're going to have a missing data point, because it's not representative of who they are. So you're trying to find, it sounds to me that if we can look at some technology that can hopefully even out the playing field, right? So you can compare from one day to the next.
Or I think that's a great example. The thing that we experienced when I was working in a multidisciplinary practice in Belgium was the fact that when the kids came in, they were assessed at the beginning and you got a slot of about an hour and a half to test them. So you could do whatever you desired to check in on them. We had a standardized schedule, of course. But then at the end of the year, you had to schedule in your testing through 3 different sessions of half an hour spread over 3 weeks.
Right.
So 1 week, they're great. And then you perform the movement ABC.
Yeah.
But then the next week, when you do the VMI tests of their visual motor
integration.
functions, then, they're tired. So they're performing subpar or sub their own capacities.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult because you can't, you saw an improvement and you can prove it qualitatively, but the states demand sometimes quantitative data to show.
That's true.
Do they improve? And you're unable to show it to them.
I think that's a dangerous point because you can't show the good effect that's just happened. But on the flip side, it could be the other way around. The child could have performed really poorly in their first day because they weren't quite feeling up for it. You engage in a non-evidence-based intervention and they happen to feel really good at the end and you go, whoa, this intervention made a big difference, when we know that actually probably not.
And I think that's where technology can come in, because if you use technology in your therapy and it constantly extracts data during the process, then you have a point A and a point B, but in between you have multiple tiny little data points which you can show to have a progression. And okay, maybe you have a dip at the end, but then you can say, okay, it was a formal test, kid didn't like it. It's different than if you just do a 1 and a 1 and a 2, and if there's no improvement, well, then you're a bad, and I'm making exclamation points with my hands, but then you're a bad therapist. No, it's just you didn't have enough data points to show that you're actually progressing with the kid.
I love how you've gone into that sort of detail there. So tell me now, as a one main point, what's your top tip for clinicians on how they can implement your findings from this poster into the practice? What do you want them to walk away with?
I think one of the key messages I always give when I give talks is, please, if you have a problem, if you have an issue, try and find people in the area. I think the maker community online is very big. There's people who are willing to, for free even, just as a project, want to make things that help specific groups. I think collaboration is the key. And one of the main ideas that a professor at the Ghent once said to me was, if we fight technology, we're going to be replaced by it, because then they're going to find AI systems that may diagnose or may provide adequate therapies. But if we work with technology, we get to determine the terms in which we collaborate with it. And that's, I think, the main message I want to give.
That's great. That absolutely resonates with me too, because when we keep talking about the information we provide online, if we're not going to make evidence research available to anyone, what's going to happen is the other part of the story, which is not evidence-based, goes out online, and we lose the narrative there. So I think we need to keep up, whether we like it or not. It's where the direction of life is. So we probably just need to keep up and learn how to use it. So thank you for that really stimulating thought about what it is that we could do and use technology. Thank you for your time. I absolutely love that.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it was lovely.
Thank you very much.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in for this one. I'll put links of this on our website, researchworks.net. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you all again very soon. Bye.